scientist in the Texas Master Beekeeping Program, which means that I'm obsessed with bees, and I took a test and they said, yep, you are. It's like a 5-year program that Texas A&M runs that kind of helps people express their bee love in a productive way and educate the public about bees. And at this point, my wife is tired of hearing me talk about bees, so I'm out here terrorizing the public. She said I should see other people, so hello. Anyway, this is my first time giving this talk. I don't know if it's 15 minutes or 5 hours, so either way I'm sorry or you're welcome. But let's see what happens. My goal is to talk a bit about why I beekeep, why anyone would beekeep, and then how you can get into it if you're looking to get started. I'm pretty new myself. I've been at it for 2 years. I've got 8 hives, and I feel like I'm decent at it, but every beekeeper's got their own opinions. If you've got 5 beekeepers and ask, you'll get 6 opinions back. So I'll try to give you a couple. For me, this quote kind of encompasses why I got started beekeeping, which was literally my garden was pitiful, and I was like, how can I make my garden better? And something that came up was bees are good at pollinating things. And you won't have to go tap your tomatoes by hand, they'll just do it. So I joined the local bee club and figured out how to get some bees and threw them in my garden, and lo and behold, it pollinated like crazy. And then I found out that I'm just obsessed with them. They're really fun little insects, and there's just a bottomless well of stuff to learn about them. I haven't found the end yet, and I'm still digging, looking for more. So some early questions you might have about beekeeping is will you get stung? Yeah, but not a lot. There's bee armor that you can wear that's very effective, and I haven't been stung while wearing my bee suit. The only time I have been stung is when I go out and I poke the bear and I get a little too aggressive and cocky, and they let me know that they didn't like what I did. Will it hurt? Yes, but just a little bit. It's really not that bad. It's like a 5-minute kind of hot sensation where you want to like suck on the thing and like make it stop and maybe some ice, and it goes away. And then like 12 hours later you swell up like just this giant ball sometimes. And sometimes nothing happens, like a mosquito bite. I don't understand. Like sometimes they really get you, and sometimes not so bad. And really, once you get over that hump, it's not the worst thing in the world, and I'll go out and take a hit and not worry too much about it. Like I did to my wife. And then the last question a lot of beginners would ask is, will I get honey the first year? And the answer is yes, but only a little bit. The first year that you get your bees, they're going to be spending all their time building up wax, and that takes a lot of their energy, and they're putting that honey back into like augmenting the hive and making it bigger for the next couple years where you will start getting honey. So just a little history on beekeeping. This I've discovered is just this ancient thing that goes back forever. Like as long as people have been writing things down, we've been interacting with bees. This is a cave painting from 10,000 years ago in Spain where there's this crazy person climbing up the top of a mountain. You can see angry bees buzzing around them, and they're reaching into a cave stealing the honey. People still do it this way today, but we found out a lot better ways to not have to climb up on top of stuff. By the time of the Egyptians, they had just fully industrialized honey, beekeeping and everything. They had a vizier of honey whose whole job was just keep track of where all the honey was moving around through ancient Egypt, and put prices on it to grain and stuff like that. They kept them in jars that were on their sides, just stacked up like a wall, and they would just reach in, interact with bees, and then just smoke them all out when it was time to collect the honey. And they just figured out if you put a jar out and it's dark and it's the right shape, bees will move in. And they would just have huge industrial operations. Again, this is still done in Egypt today, but the modern method has definitely taken over most of the industry there. They kind of do it for examples and funsies these days that way. Back over in Europe, we were also beekeeping there, but they used wicker baskets just kind of flipped over with a hole on the bottom. They're called a skep. This is what it would look like if you picked it up and looked inside. Bees just kind of built their comb in all directions. They would put some sticks through to kind of give them some structure. The problem with the skep is that you can't pull the comb out and kind of see what's happening, and when you want the honey, you have to just kill the whole hive. So they would smoke the whole hive out and start over with a new one. They'd save a couple so that they could replicate, and then they'd fill more skeps and so on. They had the kind of start of a modern bee suit, but it was more of a wicker front and probably not as effective as today. So these are some examples of modern ways that we keep hives now. This one here is the top bar hive, which is just literally sticks across the top, and the bees will build their comb down. These are the ones you've probably seen a lot of, which is the Langstroth, which is the super effective standardized hive that most beekeepers will use. And then over there, I think is the Polish or Slovenian hive. And they just stack them in, like each one of those different colors is a different beehive, and it's on a truck. So they can take it around and pollinate different people's fields and just drive it up and pollinate on site. I'm gonna focus on the Langstroth because that's what I use, and it's what you'll find in the stores around these parts. So some bee stuff that I think is cool that kind of informs beekeeping as well. They are related to wasp and ants. It's the same kind of general phylum of animal. And what relates them all is that they have these wings, which are gossamer and see-through. On the bee, they've actually got 4, but when they fly, they're connected together by these little Velcro strips called pendulae. And their wings are very agile. They can hover like a helicopter rather than like most bugs, which just kind of like zoom and fly into stuff. The bee can hover, go up and down, backwards, forwards, and that's what lets them get into those flowers and really just dig all the nectar out of them. And they're just super agile when it comes to most insects. Their vision is also extremely good. It shifted a bit towards the blue, so they wouldn't be able to see my fancy bee shirt, but they would see in a flower just all kinds of colors you're not seeing that are there as markers to bees to say, hey, this is where the nectar is, because bees and flowers have co-evolved such that the bees are there to do a service for the flowers. The flowers are advertising, hey, I've got free sugar water, come on over, and the bees show up, take the free sugar, and then also the pollen, which then they take flower to flower. The other cool thing about bees in regards to that is that they are flower specific. So one worker bee will actually zero in and be like, I'm a bluebonnet bee. And they go bluebonnet to bluebonnet to bluebonnet. And if they see a daisy, they don't go hit the daisy. And that's part of the agreement that they have with the flowers over the thousands of years of evolution, is that we're gonna be specific, you guys give us the sugar, and we'll together get this all figured out. There's also thousands of kinds of bees that all have different shaped mouths and different body arrangements. The flowers also, so some bees literally just can't get their body into the flower because they're not the right bee for that flower. So a lot of my time as a beekeeper is spent looking around my yard, like which ones are they spending their time in, because those are the ones I want to encourage, because I want my bees around. But also, if I see a native bee hitting a flower, I'm going to keep that one around too, because I want the native bees to survive as well. So they got 5 eyes. Those 2 big ones are the ones where they do most of their seeing. They're just covered in facets, thousands of them. And then they've got 3 other ones. So you can see one right here called a celly, and then the other ones are hiding up here somewhere in the fur, that are how they actually orient themselves in flight. And what the coolest thing I think about those is that they actually bypass part of the brain circuitry, because their wings flap so fast, they can't send all the signals through the brain and keep it all up. So it goes around the brain to the wings. And the ocelli are actually how they orient themselves in flight. So if they see a little bit too much dark on one, they'll know they need to reorient back up, and they kind of balance themselves like an airplane with them. And I just think that's super cool that they have eyes that skip the brain. Oh man, forward. So we got wings, legs. So their legs are super cool. They're very specialized. This is one of their back legs, and it's just covered in all this fur, which is how they store the pollen. If you've ever seen a bee in flight with these huge pollen baskets on the back, they're actually packing that into these legs with their other ones. Their middle legs are the packers, and they hammer it in there. And then their front legs have little teeny scoops on them, which they can use to clean the pollen off of their antenna. A lot of insects just have to kind of nibble dirt off their antenna. The bees have a specific part of their front leg where they, like a cat, kind of get in there and knock all the pollen off. So just very fancy little creatures. And then communication on them is just ridiculous. They touch each other, they smell each other, they dance at each other, and then they throw up into each other's mouths. So this is actually a major way the colony communicates health of the colony. Like, they can actually tell if they've got a queen based on the chemicals that they're ingesting from their sisters as they go colony around and just spit into each other's mouths all day long. And it's just like a way of saying hi. They're like, ha, and they get it out. And then the dancing thing, I don't know if you've heard of the waggle dance, but that's actually how they tell each other where the nectar sources are. And humans have spent enough time sitting down next to beehives that they've decoded the dance, and they can actually look at this and say 2 miles that way is where the bees are telling each other the nectar is. It's based on the angle of the sun, which based on how far left or right there are from north when they are in the hive and they waggle, they say, okay, it's 5 degrees left of the sun, 2 miles, and that's the dance. And then they repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And the more watchers there are on the dance floor, the more show up at the flower and drain it dry and then dance more about it. And it's this kind of feedback loop of dancing and how excited they are about it that gets more to go hit that flower. You may have noticed if you leave a Coke can out and one bee finds it, 100 bees find it. And they're telling each other where that thing is. They go back home and recruit more. It's quicker. I'm gonna get it. So anyway, I don't have a picture of the superorganism, but the colony is made up of something like 40,000 bees when it's at its peak. And the whole thing is actually itself an organism. Like you think of each bee as a cell in the body, they've all got their role. The wax is kind of like the skeleton. The queen bee would be the ovary, and we'll get to this all. And then the workers, which are also female, are just kind of like white blood cells doing things, protecting the hive, bringing food in. And then you've got the drones, which are the testes of the hive. But it reproduces as a colony. So in spring, the colony will decide it's time, and it will actually split itself into 2. And one will go find a new home, and one will stay there. And now you've got 2 sets of bees, and there's a queen and one in the other. We'll talk more about how that all goes. But they do everything as a group. So beemocracy is my funny word for all that. And the interesting thing here is that they actually, based on what they're fed as children, will turn into different bees. So the queen bee will lay an egg, and the worker bees will show up and they'll start feeding any egg royal jelly, which comes out of their heads. Because they're weird insects. They eat pollen and sugar and then excrete a gel out of their head and they feed it to their children. It's called royal jelly. And if the baby is fed nothing but royal jelly for her whole life, she turns into a queen bee. It's like this super nutritious, pheromone-filled, hormone-filled stuff. The queen bee will then go out on a mating flight, and that's the one time she leaves the hive, is to go get filled with reproductive influence from drones, and then she just starts pumping eggs out, 1,500 to 2,000 a day during the peak, which is usually spring to summer. But she's not at all in charge. She's literally just being shuttled around by these other bees that you see around her. They're called the retinue. And bees will just take turns being in charge of the queen, and they kind of just push her around the hive to where there's spots to lay. They feed her royal jelly for her whole life, just peeking into her mouth all day long. She doesn't defecate a lot because the royal jelly is super refined already. It's almost been digested. But when she does, they clean that up. She doesn't have to go outside like other bees do. They don't poop in the hive, but she does. And then she just looks for empty cells and lays eggs all day long. She has a very long abdomen compared to the other bees because it is entirely ovaries in there. And it's also long enough that she can dip it down into the cells and actually deposit eggs directly in the center. Her daughters usually are also female, but they are not able to produce viable eggs. They can only make drones. So if you lose your queen when you're beekeeping, which is like the big fear of the beekeepers, I crushed my queen or she ran away, the workers cannot make more workers and they can't make queens. But they can take a very fresh egg and feed it royal jelly like crazy and cram out an emergency queen. So if your queen dies and you have eggs, probably okay. You're just a little setback because you've got to make a new queen. She's got to mature a little bit, go on her mating flight, and then start again. So you're back something like 2 weeks, 3 weeks of beekeeping time if you lose your queen, which sucks. The alternative is you can go buy one from somebody at the bee store and pay like $40 and get right back to going again. So I'll talk about how you can figure that out. But the workers, they cannot lay more queens because they're not able to do that. The workers, they go through a whole bunch of different stages in their life. So as soon as they pop out, they start working. Their first job is to be a nurse bee. So they go around and tend to the baby bees and start puking royal jelly out at them. The differentiator on what turns a queen into a worker is that worker babies stop getting the royal jelly after 3 days. And then they just get pollen and sugar and this much weaker diet. And they don't then express into a full queen. They don't get the big abdomen. Their ovipositor, which is the stinger, turns into a stinger instead of being on a queen. It's a smooth thing that she actually shoots eggs through. On the workers, it is the stinger that they shoot poison through, and it's barbed. And the legs that I was talking about don't develop that way on the queen. That's purely based on what they're fed is from. So after they're done keeping track of babies and cleaning the hive, they go into guard duty, and their job is to sit at the front of the hive and wait for people like me to show up and ruin our day. And they do that for a little while. At about a week and a half, 2 weeks, I think they start foraging. So they'll go out on what's called an orientation flight, and they kind of all do this at once. It's really creepy. They roll out of the hive, they start buzzing around, looking at it and orienting what their hive looks like, what that tree is over there, what that is over there, and they start doing bigger and bigger circles around their hive. And then once they've kind of mapped the area in their head, they've locked in on where home is, they just start foraging. So some of them go out and scout and look for new stuff, and they come home and dance about things, and then other ones are more like followers. Bees all have different personalities, like some of them are definitely into finding new stuff, and some are more like followers, and just wait for someone to tell them where the things are, but they'll go out, fill their gullet full of nectar, pack their things full of pollen. Some are more pollen collectors, some are more nectar collectors. They're all very opinionated, which is apparently part of like what makes the hive work, is that they kind of like do different things. They're not all on the exact same path all the time, and they, once they figure out their job, they kind of stick with it for a while. And then their last thing to do is gather water, because that's the most dangerous thing a bee can do, is go near water where frogs and other bugs are trying to get to when they collect the water. Then eventually one day their wings just wear out and they don't make it home. The workers are super expendable. They last like 2 to 4 weeks if they're lucky. In the summertime, they literally just fly themselves to death. Their wings get tattered, and one day they just can't make it back to the hive. And then the wintertime, they have different worker bees that are extra fatty and don't spend a lot of time out, and they actually last months. And they're the ones that go into fall, go through the winter, and then raise the next spring with the baby bees when the queen gets to lay. She might just stop for the winter, depending on how cold it gets. The last bee is the boys. They're the drones. They do nothing for the hive except pass on genetic diversity. They don't work. They just sit there and beg worker bees to feed them. They don't even go into the cells and get the honey themselves. They just go up and beg. You can literally see them beg for food to the workers until they do the trophallaxis, which is the science word for puking with each other's mouths. And then they go out and they fly around these areas called drone congregation areas. Year to year it's different drones, but they still go to the same spots. There's something about just geography of certain things that just makes them go there. And they'll fly around like 100 feet in the air, just waiting for ladies. And these queens will come out on their mating flights, and these drones have gigantic eyes compared to the other bees, which is the main way you tell them apart. And they spot the queens from a mile away. Apparently the queens have like a fluorescent thing that shows up in ultraviolet that they can see better. And they will mate on the wing and then die immediately after. They're ripped apart and fall to their death, and that is their life.
So drones are the smartest bees.
Yeah. And if they don't mate successfully and they make it to fall, the bee colony kicks them out and lets them die of exposure, because why feed them for the winter? Nobody's mating after a certain point. So, such is the drone's life. So that's the jobs the bees have. This is the life cycle of the bees. So when they first come out, they look like a little teeny grain of rice sitting at the bottom of the cell. I cannot see them without my glasses, so I have a really bright flashlight that I bring out when I'm looking for eggs. They hang out around 3 days regardless. This is the royal jelly phase for everybody. And you can see these larvae are still in royal jelly. You can see them floating in that milky juice, and that's a good sign when you're inspecting your hive. If they're floating in jelly, that means they're well nourished. If it's really dry in there, that's when maybe there's not enough pollen out in the world for the ladies to turn into the jelly, and they're having to underfeed. And they will actually cannibalize if they get into a spot where they just have no food. They'll start with the eggs, because they're the ones that they've invested least in, and start eating their way through the children so that they can get enough protein to then feed the ones that might have a chance of surviving through whatever dearth they're currently experiencing. So anyway, they hang out as larvae for a while, depending on whether it's a queen bee or a worker or a drone, then you start getting longer, shorter gestation periods. But once they start pupating, that's when they cap over the cell, and they hang out inside this little cocoon for a number of days before emerging and starting their adult life, which you can see the ranges here: workers 6 weeks, drones 12, and queens for 1 to 3 years, sometimes more. And then I consider this part of the life cycle, which is the swarming superorganism of the bee colony. In spring, when they feel like they've got a lot of food, they will decide it's time to reproduce. And the queen will make a queen cell, which looks significantly different. I'll show a picture of one. And from that, a daughter queen will be born. And when she thinks they're about to pop out, she'll take half to about 3/4 of the workers. They'll all gorge themselves on honey, and they'll just leave the hive. And they look like that, over on a tree limb or somebody's eave, and they're just hanging out looking for a new spot to set up shop. So they'll all do what's called a bouviac, which is them hanging out on a spot like that, and then scout bees will start going out looking for a nice cavity to set up shop in, and they actually measure it. They go inside a tree and they're like flying from side to side, up and down, seeing if it's the size that they like, and it's got a hole they like, or if it's somebody's roof or wall or whatever, water meter, all these places they love to be. And they start, because they've sucked all that honey up, they're able to convert that into wax, and they start building a new house. Meanwhile, back at the old house, the baby queens start emerging. The first one to come out, there might be like 5 or 10 of them, finds all of her sisters and kills them. She stabs them through their cells, and the workers clean them out, and this new queen takes over the hive. She goes on a mating flight, and she's got a nice swarm. And now you've got 2 beehives. So as beekeepers, what we're trying to do is control the swarm tendency in our hives, because we don't want to lose all our bees, and we would like the 2 beehives. So come springtime, we do something where we start doing what's called splitting hives, which is taking all of our overwintered hives and taking 2 beehive boxes and dividing them between the boxes and basically making an artificial swarm. That then takes away their urge to do it themselves and leave us, and then we have free bees, which is the best kind of bees. So this is a close-up of a frame, which is what we're looking at when we do inspection of our hives. So I'll talk about the bits that make a frame up. So along the top, they've stored all their honey. When they first get the honey in, it looks like water in the cells, and it doesn't have this covering on it. And they actually have to blow air over the top of that and dehydrate the honey down to about 17%, which then makes it antibacterial, antifungal, and it doesn't grow yeast and ferment. And at that point, they put a layer of wax over the top, and that's their winter food that they're storing. And that's why we're keeping bees a lot of the time, is for the honey, right? So they're so good at it that we can actually take a bunch, and they don't really know the difference when it comes wintertime. So what we're after is a bunch of this, hopefully on a frame without a bunch of this other stuff, because it's easier to extract. Then you can usually see a band of pollen, which will be hopefully multicolored, which means they're going to a lot of different kinds of flowers, which means that your honey is probably better for that whole local honey anti-allergen effect, and it means your bees are getting better nutrition, because you can't just eat one food. Bees can't either. They need a balanced diet. So that gets them all the different macronutrients, having multicolored pollen. So you're hoping to see that when you're in your hive. And then they'll have their babies, which eggs would be the little dots, and then you get down to the larva, some pupa that aren't capped, and then they put a little silk cocoon over the top and cap them up. And you generally will see it in that arrangement as well, because the queen lays in circles from the middle of the frame all the way to the outside. So the oldest ones are in the middle, and then they get younger as you get to the edges, and then they store food around the edge. Yes?
So after the bee comes out of its cocoon, do they reuse the cells?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they will recycle the cells for years and years, and when they first build the wax, it's this beautiful white, and then they have these dirty little bee feet, and they also leave a little bit every time. So the cells kind of get smaller and smaller over time, and darker and darker. So you do have to rotate your comb out eventually, because it gets kind of just gross. It also builds up pesticides over time, which is also undesirable, so unfortunately you can't keep it forever. But it is definitely like gold. Like once you get it, that's when you really are able to ramp up, because I'll show you my equipment I brought here doesn't have it, and it's kind of a starter problem. So this is some queen bee behavior with the retinue. Typically people will mark their queens with a paint pen so that it's easier to find them when you're doing an inspection. You can buy queens pre-marked, it costs more money. Or you can try to figure it out yourself, which there is a method for that. And these bees are just basically pushing her around the hive, telling her what to do, and feeding her and cleaning up after her. So when you are doing an inspection, you're trying to figure out where's my queen, looking for the retinue is one way to do it, is because there's this kind of mass of bees that just is mosh pitting around the hive, and you can hopefully spot her. The other way to spot a queen that I found fairly effective is when you're holding the hive, the frame, you can turn it like this, and you can see her walking because she's taller than everyone else. So if you're like looking over the top of the frame, you can spot her butt. She's patrolling. And the other thing is when you're inspecting, the queens don't want to be found, so like as soon as you look at one side, she'll run to the other. So like they're just so difficult to spot. Okay. Let's see if I can present. All right, so the gear. So as I mentioned, I am into the Langstroth hive, which is the most common hive. It's what's in all the shops. It's what you can buy on the internet. It's super standardized. It's always the exact same. You can buy it from this kind and that kind. They're gonna fit together. You can buy it pre-built. You can milk it yourself. All of this has been around since 1852, so like pre-Civil War, we've been doing it this way. And the key thing that made it go from we put a basket on the ground to this was that this guy figured out that there's this thing called bee space, which is how much room bees need to walk around before they start doing wonky stuff with their comb and making your life difficult. So we figured out if stuff is 3/8 of an inch, they won't build comb across it. And if it's less, they don't want it. And if it's more, they build comb across it. It's really frustrating. So this hive, if you didn't do it, you'd get things like this, which would be like the inside of a skep or a wall or whatever. And you can see they've got their bee space, but they don't do it in a way that's easy for us to access and do our inspections and other things. And it's actually illegal now to keep bees in a way that you can't do an inspection. So there are other hive types, the top bar and the ware and so on, that do it in similar stuff but in a different way. And this is just the one I like. So it's giving us this ordered thing where we can pull the frames out one by one, we can interchange them between our hives, and it's super great. So they'll come in a couple different sizes. Mine is a 10 frame deep, so this is as big as they get. Full of honey, this is like 55 pounds, so you don't typically want to keep honey in these, and they make a medium size, which is a little bit less. And the medium frames are a different height as well. So that's one thing, is you can't interchange your frames between the deeps and the mediums, but if you've got a bunch of deeps, you can actually do stuff like if you've got one hive that's weak, you can gift it stuff from another hive. You can give it a frame of honey. You can give it a frame of eggs even, and it will adopt the eggs. So like I had one hive that wasn't doing great, and I just took my strongest hive and evened them out, and they were none the wiser. So the medium ones, when you fill them with honey, are around 45, 40 pounds. So they're a little bit more manageable. They also make a shallow if you're just not able to lift. The other thing you can do is, instead of 10 frame boxes, you can do 8 frame boxes, which again, 80% of the weight. And the bees don't care. I just was feeling manly, so I went 10 frames.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the 8 frames I've found are harder to buy in stores. They just sell out so much faster. So that's a consideration as well. It's just, these are super accessible. There are a couple other pieces to it that I'll talk about as well. You can often buy these in a set. So they'll sell you one of these with like 10 frames and the bottom to put it on. I actually like these ones with strings. So it's a mesh. And the reason I like it is because Texas is super hot. So this helps with ventilation through the hive. The other thing this is really good for is pest control, which I'll talk about in a bit, but there are things that want to eat your bees, and they fall through the bottom of here and can't get back into the hive. So this is one way of controlling those pests without having to use as many chemicals, which I'm always happy to do. The other piece to a hive that you need is an inner cover. So that's this top piece right here. And this is basically just goes on top of whatever your topmost box happens to be at the time, and adds a little bit more ventilation on the top. And then lastly, the telescoping cover, which is that guy here, goes over the top and finishes off the insulation effect and gives it like some metal anti-rain, anti-hail protection. Then the other piece that becomes important when you want to make honey is a queen excluder. And this one will go between, so you keep all your eggs and your queen down here, and then you want your honey up here, you don't want eggs in it. You put this between those two boxes, and the queen is too fat to fit through these holes, but the workers can. So they'll go up top, and they'll just store honey like crazy, and there won't be a bunch of eggs mixed in to your honey when you want to extract. You don't have to kill a bunch of babies. This also has other uses, like when you're splitting your hives, it helps you isolate the hive, so you know the queen is in one box, and then you can have another box on top and know the queen's not there, and then you can manipulate stuff and know you're not going to hurt her or lose her. And then this last little piece is called an entrance reducer, and it's got these little wood notches on it that you can spin it around, and you can make the entrance of your hive different sizes. So when you first get your hive, it's really weak, you want to make a teeny little hole so they have less space to protect, and then you get it a little bigger, and then summertime you just open that full hole right there, just flying in and out hopefully. So that's basically the bits to a hive, and you're going to start out, you'll need the bottom board, one box, and a top, and then if you're successful, you're going to need more boxes in the middle, basically, is what you're looking at, year-wise, a hive. And I'll talk about how to get all that and costs and stuff. Then tools. You don't need a lot of tools past that. You need a smoker to calm the bees down. And as I was discussing earlier, the bees communicate through pheromones. The smoker makes it so they just cannot smell that they're angry. A lot of people think it's that they think it's a forest fire and they're going to go collect all the honey and leave, but really we're just there to shut down the internet for the bees. And you smoke a little at the entrance when you show up, and they kind of can't warn everybody that you're there. You take the top off, you smoke a little bit, and they can go down into the hive and leave you alone. And then as you're working the hive, you just kind of puff them every 5 minutes, 3 minutes, something like that, and they just can't get pissed off. I've tried it without the smoker, and it's terrible. They don't like me there. Yes?
What do you like to use for smoker fuel?
Smoker fuel.
I'm new and I'm trying to, that's the hard
Sure, I
part.
can definitely talk about how to light the smoker. So that is definitely a challenge a lot of people have. What I do is I take some wood chips that I get at HEB, they're for smoking meat. And I put like a fistful of wood chips at the bottom, and I get a blowtorch, and I just torch the heck out of those wood chips until they're on fire, like a flame coming out. Then I take smoker pellets that you would use for like a Traeger, and I just put a fistful on top, maybe like 2 or 3 fistfuls, and just bellows like crazy till I feel like they're lit, and then I close it.
I just need to get a little bit more aggressive.
Yes. Really what you're trying to do is build a cigarette burning from the bottom. So the beginner mistake is you fill it full and you try to light it from the top, and then it just goes out immediately. So what you really want is like coals at the bottom, like raging fire to coals, and then you put your stuff on top and let it burn. Cool. All right. The other tools that I think are required, you get these, you only need one of these hive tools. I like this one with the J on it. I have this one. I've never tried the other ones. I have no opinion whatsoever. But the J one, I like because I can use it to kind of hook my frames up and get them out of the hive easier. It's a good little lever. You might want a couple of them. They're super cheap and they're easy to forget at that hive over there. And trudge back over. So I just literally keep one at every hive now. And that's made my life a lot easier. Spray paint them hot pink so you can find them. Bucket Buddy, I go through 5-gallon buckets like crazy. And this is a cool little tool I found on the internet that now I need too. Scissors, flashlight is also a must for me just to find the eggs. That you can use the sun and at the right angle, and I would just rather get a flashlight and be done with it.
Good stuff.
Yeah. And I got one at Lowe's for like $15, and it's so many lumens you can't even look in it. It's so bright. And it's USB rechargeable. Personal protection. So in Texas, they'll try to sell you these suits on Amazon that are made of cotton. Terrible idea. Don't do that. You can take a look at mine after if you like, but it's this material that's ventilated. The wind just blows through. It's glorious when the wind is going. I have mine as just a top jacket and then a pair of pants that are separate that I can wear if I'm feeling like it's going to be a spicy day. And then I wear plastic rain boots just to keep all the bugs off me, the brown ticks and things. I also keep an EpiPen around. They're expensive and hard to come by, but I'm not allergic. I feel like if somebody came to my house and got hit by a bee, I'd want to have it on hand, so I've got an expired EpiPen.
It'll still work.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Benadryl in the car.
Benadryl as well, yeah, I take the Benadryl if I get stung, that helps a lot, but it makes me sleepy, so.
If not even that property, you just
Yeah,
drive back.
and then also, if you catch one of these on a nail, which I did, you can just duct tape over the hole. You have to buy a whole new bee suit, but they will find a way in. I've had a bee in my body a few times. So why do we do hive inspections? My main reason is to make sure I've still got a queen in there, usually because I'm just paranoid about squishing my queens. I haven't, to my knowledge, but I have lost a few. And I saw this happening in my hive, which is a queen cell that they made off of a just open, so this would be an emergency one probably. The ones that are planned tend to be hanging off the bottom of the frames. The ones that are unplanned pregnancies are straight up inside. So if you see one of these, probably leave it alone. The bees usually know better than we do. You could try to pop it and like you think they're swarming or something like that, but I figure if they're making a new queen, they have a good idea and they don't do that. So the other thing you can do is you can look for, are there fresh eggs? Is there a larva? You've probably got a queen. You don't actually have to find a queen every time. You just need to find evidence of it. The other thing you're looking for are food stores. So if there's no honey in the hive or no pollen in the hive, that means you might want to think about supplemental feeding. Because if they run out, they will cannibalize and slow you down. So sometimes just a little bit of sugar water is what it takes to get them over. If you're working with newbies, you want to know, have they filled out wax on all their frames yet? If everything's full, let's stick another box on and we'll keep working. So if you see that 8 out of 10 frames or so are done, time for more boxes, get more wax done. You can also figure out if they're about to swarm. If you start seeing a lot of bees, or just the box is super full of bees you haven't done anything about it, start thinking about doing a split, or you're gonna lose your bees. And then you're looking for diseases and pests. So there are a whole host of different things that can affect your hive, which I have a whole slide on. We'll go back to it. Feeding bees, these are about when I think about feeding bees. So in the spring, if you give them a 1-to-1 sugar water mix, that encourages them to build more wax. They basically get so full, they're trying to put it somewhere, and they have nowhere to put it, so then they metabolize that and they actually produce the wax, and that's when they build it. So you kind of have to like gorge your bees to get them to make wax, otherwise they just think, we'll do what we need. You can also throw, yes?
I have a question. So, is there any way to make like the 1-to-1 quick? Because it takes me over an hour once a week.
Oh wow.
Whenever, because I have 6 hives.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
So
do I just need to get a bigger pot?
I did get
or?
a bigger pot. So what I do is I have a pot that's fairly large. It takes, I do a 10-pound sack of sugar and 5 liters of water. I heat the water to just under boiling, I stop.
Okay.
So you don't want boiling because it produces a byproduct when it's too hot.
I mean, I've learned how to make rock candy. I mean, it's
Yeah, so I just do
very
this big pot,
stressful.
and I make for me, for my 8 hives, that's 1 round for everybody to get a mason jar full like this. So then I just do it in like prepper cooking, and I make like a whole fridge worth in a sitting. So I'll do it like, but it's not an hour for me. It's more like 5 minutes of stirring, I would say, and then I don't even let it cool. I just put it straight in the mason jars,
Yeah.
and then fridge it. I've got like a fridge in the garage, and I'm just filling it with sugar water. So I'll just kind of batch through like 3 days worth at a time.
Because I'll end up putting a gallon per hive because they were brand new. And so they were they were super happy. They would like all come out and like drinking it like a straw.
Yeah.
So we were just making a lot.
I was going through one of these jars a
You are
day.
too? Okay,
Yeah, I
okay.
do about a gallon per week.
That's what I was. Yeah.
They suck it up. They thought I was crazy at HEB when I was buying that machine.
Yeah, I go to
Yeah.
Costco and just buy the huge bag
Yeah.
and
Let's go, I love that concept.
Yeah.
just watch
I-
because some of them are like I'm looking at like to the penny and they're like,
And I like the HEB, the water jugs that have the handle on them.
that's what I carry out to the
Okay.
hives. That's what I put them
Good
in.
girl, okay, we're on to that, sorry.
So what I do is I have these mason
Yeah.
jars. I have these mason jars just ready to go in 5-gallon buckets, and I just bucket them out like that, and then just jar. I tried other top feeders. I had the little top round feeders that go on top. They got dirty really fast. Like they would just ferment like crazy. You have the in-hive ones, right? Yeah. I didn't like having to pull the tops off. So I like these ones because I'll put the inner cover. I'll put the jar just straight over this, and then I put a medium on top. And that just keeps the jar out of the elements and keeps the bees kind of contained. And then I just put the telescoping over that. And the jar covers the whole hole, so they're not like in this space. And you also can do like a mesh hardware cloth over the hole as well, and then they're not flying at you, and you can replace them without even wearing a suit. I didn't like the other things because I was cleaning them all the time, and the jars, like, they go through the whole jar in a day, and then I just, new jar, take the old jar and I fill it with water and redo it. So that's been the system I've liked. The other thing is I like to do a little pollen in the spring because they need protein to raise their young. And the pollen around here exists in the spring, but they flock to this stuff when I put it out and I see it coming back into the hive. And I know that more protein is better, and that just really gets them going and building the brood. Summer and spring, mid-spring to summer, you don't need to feed them because that's when they're actually doing the real harvesting from all the great flowers we have around here right now. And they may not even take the sugar water if you try to give it to them. Just ignore it because they know they get better. And then in fall, you do like a really thick sugar if you think that they have not gotten enough honey or you've taken too much, because they don't have to sweat it down as much. You give them the real thick, just almost syrup. And that just lets them store it immediately and cap it right away. And then you can do also a pollen patty in the hive before you overwinter, and that just gives them a little extra as well. And then winter, hopefully you're not opening the hive because the temperature in there needs to stay up and you don't want to be messing with it.
What should it be at?
So I have some temp sensors in mine, and in the winter, they were down in the 70s, mid 70s, because they're actually vibrating all winter long. That's what they need that sugar for, just sit there and buzz. They like it for brood in the mid 90s, and even up to the hundreds, they're okay. And Varroa pests actually die at a lower temperature than bees. So Varroa will die out in the mid to high hundreds. Bees can make it up to about 113 before they just shut down brood rearing. So the summer heat actually can be somewhat helpful for Varroa, but at a certain point it's not good for the bees either. And they are actually trying to ventilate the hive back down to 95 when it goes above that, which they do by bringing water in. So bee health, I've been mentioning this mite, the Varroa destructor. These are not pimples, they're an actual mite that just hangs on to bees and gets up under their skin, their armor, and sucks their fat cells. And in the process is just weakening them and also filling them full of viruses, which then makes them more vulnerable to fungi and bacteria. And then finally, tertiary, other bugs will come in and start taking the hive over. But the crux of it all is bee health. The healthier the bees, the better they are able to withstand the Varroa. The better they withstand the Varroa, they don't have the virus and all that other stuff. So like, if you make it down to hive beetles and wax moths, you've probably already lost battle versus everything up above it. They're just kind of one of the more visible things that you'll see, but there's these little black beetles that'll move into the hive. And if it's really bad, you get these wax moths which have their larvae just tunnel through the comb and then ultimately eat all the wax and pop out wax moths. But again, if you got to that point, yes.
So I have a question about hive beetles.
Uh-huh.
So I have them, and I have this guy that comes and helps me, and we did like beetle traps.
Yeah.
and you put peanut oil in them. But I've also I've heard different things about, like, I have a different hive. I have the Apame, I think is how you say it. So some people put like dichotomous earth in the bottom tray, and there's a lot of people that talk about it and they just love it on this Facebook group, and then there's other people in the group that are like, ah, and then I read about it and I'm like it's not really good for you and I, and then I worry, like, what if the little guys get down, it's gonna kill insects, so it could kill my bees. So what is your
So my
opinion?
thing, I haven't tried the earth and I haven't had a lot of beetle problems, but I think the reason I haven't is because I actually put my bee hives on old carpets. And
On old carpet?
old carpets,
Yeah,
I had
an old
this old carpet.
remnant.
So the beetles reproduce by falling into the dirt and burrowing into the dirt. And my theory was that if they can't get to the dirt, they can't reproduce under my hives.
Cause they got into like in the bottom tray, we had so much pollen, cause it's like, you know, when you're new, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And we found some things in there that I just didn't even know what they were. I was like, oh my gosh, I've never seen, they're huge. So like obviously we're checking them a lot more frequently, but I didn't know about the carpet, and then we have ours closer to the ground, which my husband's like, maybe I'll build some stands. He's like, maybe that will make a difference. And then I've also heard of non-scented Swiffer pads.
Yeah.
They get hung up on, so I put those, I was like, let's start with the Swiffer pads, cause the dichotomous earth can cause like lung cancer and
Yeah.
UNI and so.
Well, that's what's worked for me is I just started with the carpets and they've never shown up for me.
Yeah.
Carpet.
You go to like Best Way Carpets and just ask them if they've ripped something up lately that's nasty and ugly and they want to get rid of, and the super cheap.
Yeah, I just
So
had an
carpet
old,
on the ground.
I had an old carpet
I'll show
from
you a
like
picture
10 years
of that.
ago and I just threw it out on the field, put my beehives on top of that, and I've not seen them. And I think that's why, it's because they can't do their life cycle.
Interesting, okay.
And
Yeah, I haven't had one yet either. No,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, check it every time. And,
it's, just never been a thing for me. So for Varroa, you can do things like the bottom board, you can do some other less invasive stuff, and then there's chemicals you can throw out, which you have to do something. I think you can't just ignore them.
Right.
It used to be you could just put bees in a box and then Varroa showed up. You definitely can't just put bees in a box anymore and walk away from it. It's okay.
how do you choose?
So I'll talk about a couple things. So the screen bottom boards is my base level defense, because they fall out and that's just part of it. I haven't done it, but I intend to, which is you can get these certain kinds of frames called drone frames. They're green and they have bigger cells on them, and they induce the queen to lay a bunch of drone cells. And the thing about Varroa is it actually prefers drone cell because it's a longer gestation. They can get more bang for their buck by putting their babies in those. So you fill this whole frame with drones and then you cull it. You take it, you just freeze it, feed it to your chickens, and all of the Varroa babies are like concentrated on this one frame, and it just kind of gets a break. The problem with that one is if you forget, you've made a Varroa bomb, and you then send yourself way back, and you've made a bunch of pests for your thing. You can also do powdered sugar shakes on the bees, which are apparently more effective with the screen bottom boards than the wood bottom board, because you dust your whole hive with powdered sugar. That makes the mites fall off. They actually fall through the bottom instead of falling to the bottom and climbing back up. So it is actually effective to do that, from what I've heard. And then I also do the thymol-based treatment. So it's still an organic acid. It's not artificial, but it is a chemical treatment that will harm the hive. And that's this little. It looks like a Jello tray that you feed your kids. You peel the top off. And it's this gel inside that they don't like it, and they try to get it out of the hive, and in doing so they fumigate the hive.
I have one electrical, the thing that you stick in and you hook it to the batteries.
I'm not doing that.
That makes me nervous.
Yeah,
And
I'm
so
not
that's
doing
what
that.
I'm looking, yes, that's what I'm looking for, something else that I won't burn myself on.
Yeah, well, and that, you have to wear a respirator when you use that thing, and it's very intense, and I don't
Good
want
to
to mess
know.
with it. But yeah, thymol, I think it was Advigard is the product that I went with. There's also these strip-based ones that you can put in between the frames that are nice and easy to apply. So yeah, you gotta do something though, because otherwise you're gonna get run over. So ways to get bees. So I've categorized them by dollar signs, but you can buy a package of bees. They don't give you any frames with those, so you just literally get a box full of bees and a queen, and you put them in a box and hope for the best. I don't think it's very easy to start them that way. My preferred way is to get a nucleus colony, which you can buy from the Bee Supply or through the Williamson County Bee Club, which is how I get mine. They give you 5 frames that are just ready to go, and you take them and you put them in a bigger box, and they fill the bigger box out over time. Those will run you anywhere from $150 to $250 for those 5 frames, a queen, a few thousand bees. And then you can buy whole hives from people. They're multiple hundreds of dollars to do that. Wouldn't recommend that. And then lastly, you can go out and just catch bees. There are people all the time that find bees in their yard and want them taken away, and you can take those and put them in a box and have free bees. So I've started doing a bit of that, and people call me all the time. So if you want to collect bees, just get yourself on one of those lists. You can call.
Is it frowned upon if I come by your house and collect them?
But if you're looking to get started, a nucleus colony is the thing you want to look for. It'll be the easiest way to start. Cost breakdown, if you care about the things, this is about how much it'll be per hive that you want to build. Yeah, it's based on how cheap you want to do it and how much you want to have done for you is kind of the range. So like, you can get free bees, or you can have somebody give you bees. You can build a box from scratch, or you can buy one pre-built. You will need at least 1 or 2 deep boxes and all the frames that go inside them. And then as you start getting honey, you're going to start adding on the bees. So you can start with this stuff and buy this stuff later if that helps defray the costs. Food and medicine costs per hive per year. Looking around here, between all the sugar that I buy, it's ridiculous, but it's $1 a day worth of sugar per hive. It adds up. And you don't have to do pollen, but you can do pollen. I do think you need to do some varroa treating, so just kind of factor that into your budget that you'll be doing that every year in some way, shape, or form. And then this is the one-time cost. You only need 1 bee suit, hopefully, unless you buy a cotton one like me, in which case you need 2 bee suits. The smoker, I would over-index on the smoker and it'll last forever. Hive tools are cheap, buy a bunch. I can never have enough buckets. I'm constantly putting holes in my buckets for some reason, so I need more buckets. Oops paint, if you want to get cheap paint, you go to Lowe's or Home Depot and say, hey, do you have any returns? And you get a bucket of outdoor paint and you can paint all your hives forever off 1 bucket of paint.
Do you need to paint your hives?
You do. If you get the raw wood and put it out, it won't last as long. So a layer, when building hives, wood glue, screws, and paint, I think are the 3 big upgrades you can make so they last longer. If you just kind of like nail them and throw them out raw, they won't last. They're expensive. So grand total, you're looking at around 500 to 1,000.
Do the hives have to be wood?
They don't. She's got Acme hives, which are styrofoam and then a plastic coating.
Yeah, they're insulated.
But if I wanted to go crazy and 3D print a hive, would that be?
There's a 3D printed hive.
Okay.
You can buy the plans for it. It's very expensive. And then there's any number of different ways one can keep bees. My advice would be to pick one, even if it's crazy. Just stick with that one, because then all your gears are interchangeable. But if you're like, oh, I'm gonna have one top bar hive, one of these hives, and then you just get all this stuff that doesn't play together, which makes your life hard. And then getting into it further, I really couldn't say enough about joining this bee club. The Williamson County Club is the one I'm a member of. Let's show for them. But the main reason I joined is because we get cheap bees. We, as a club, buy 300 nukes every year and then sell them to the members. So it's like this bulk buy, and then you get nucleus colonies for 150 instead of 250. And all you have to do is be a member. It's $25 a year to be a member, and then you gain access to this bee purchase in spring when they do it. There's classes at the Texas Bee Supply that are probably way better than this, that'll teach you all kinds of good stuff. There are people that are looking to be mentors if you need a mentor. Hello. Because part of the Texas Master Beekeeper program is I do things like this to get credits, and I also mentor people, and there's all kinds of different other public service ways of giving back. So there's that. Yeah, that's my TED Talk. It actually worked out to about an hour, so I'm pleased with myself. Do we have questions?
So like you've only been doing it a few years, right?
Yeah, I'm on year 2 for
So
this.
what's the average die-off rate?
3 years.
Well, I mean, like, did you, like, before you got everything dialed in, like, did you basically go through, how many manipulations did you go through?
I have not lost a hive yet.
Okay.
He lost one. The average for beekeepers is extremely high. It's like 40 to 50%
40 to 50,
of hives.
okay.
But again, you're doubling them every year. So the US bee population is in no danger at all. It's actually higher than it's ever been. But there are a lot that die every year.
So when the queen goes on her mating flight, how long does that last?
It's a couple hours, I think.
Oh,
And
that's it?
Yeah, and she'll usually just do the one. She might do a second follow-up. But
Is
yeah.
it very often that she doesn't return, or
Yeah,
is
it can
it?
happen. She can get eaten by a blackbird or whatever.
Right, yeah,
And then that hive is probably going to fail.
okay.
So that's part of what I'm doing is when I'm inspecting, it's like, are they recovering if they don't have eggs or whatever? If they don't, I'll actually take a frame of open brood from a good hive, put it in that weak one, and hope that it can be queen form. The problem with making queens in Texas though is that a lot of the local genetics are Africanized, which are the angry bees.
Yeah.
So I buy my bees from somebody that makes friendly bees, and
You talked about inspections, is there like a bee ACF that'll come in? and
yeah,
inspect?
there actually is a chief apiary inspector of Texas.
Okay.
Which is very nice. And you can pay them to do an inspection of your hives if you feel bad about something or whatever. And there are certain diseases which you're required to report to them because your hives have to be burnt. Should you have American foul brood show up, it's like super contagious. They don't mess around with it. But yeah.
So where did you get this? My husband and I got the ones off Amazon, and he's complaining about how hot they are. So where did you get this?
I
bee
got it
suit
on
from?
Amazon too, but I looked for ventilated bee suit.
Okay.
And you can come touch it and see the material. The other thing I got is a ice pack vest. Literally a vest built out of ice pack material and it just goes in my freezer.
Well, he talked about that because he delivers, or he used to deliver package for UPS.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he was kind of always trying to invent something to like not die in the back of a
Yeah.
UPS truck.
It's only good for like the first 15 minutes, but it's worth it. Like I put it on, like I go out and then when I come take a break, I put it on then. And I'm able to go finish because 8 hives is a fair bit to get through.
Yeah.
I also find it's helpful to do like the drip trough or the what's it called
It's that liquid IV. I use
the
the
liquid
drip drop
IV,
because
but like
it's got,
chug one of those
it's
before
got
you
less
go out,
sugar. I like the liquid IV better.
and it like helps you not want to pass out 15 minutes.
You're still full of astronaut, you got the air conditioning in your carrier.
It's so
Yeah.
fun.
Spring beekeeping is great. Summer it gets rough.
Yeah, summer's over.
Starting to get rough now, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you use for your buckets? Cause we're gonna harvest our honey. We're gonna harvest them in July, so like, we'll be drinking drip drop. And, what kind of buckets do you like put it in to save it? What's your recommendation?
I haven't gotten to the point to have enough to save, but 5-gallon buckets with the slices thickets are my plan.
Okay.
And like I said, I drill holes in all the buckets I buy, so I'm just gonna buy more buckets and drill holes for those.
The key, they just get a food safe bucket. Really, you can buy some that have like the little, they call them a honey gate already pre-installed.
Okay.
That's good to store it in.
Okay.
If there was one thing you wish you'd known before you started all this, what would it be? Like, what was the thing you wish you knew when you started doing it?
It was the cotton bee suit.
Okay.
I'm wishing I'd known about carpet.
Yeah, that was just a happy accident, because I had an old carpet, and I was like, I don't wanna weed whack around it, was what I thought. And it's kept the weeds down, and apparently kept the hive beetles down. And then the other thing would be feeding my bees more. The first year I definitely underfed them, I think. So I would do more pollen for sure. I think it's undersold as a tool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, we can talk about it. We'll talk about bees all day.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming.